Hey folks, today is the part two and conclusion of my trip to Watts Island. I'm going to try not to disrespect any of the parties that are involved, but I'm also not going to do what a lot of creators did at the beginning of the case, immediately saying Chris Watts is a monster. I'm going to be a little bit more realistic because arrests should be made on fact, DNA, and any accomplices should also be named. And that did not happen in this case. So I'm going to try to bring forward some facts and my opinion on the whole thing. Thank you. Shanann was really living it up and working hard. She got on Facebook Live pretty much every day, and she tried to sell her product and tell about the benefits of it. She took Thrive trips to Las Vegas, Toronto, Mexico, New Orleans, Caribbean, etc., because there are many more I can't think of right now. They also held vision board parties, their goals and their dreams and everything. Sometimes Chris was able to attend if it was like a weekend thing, but a lot of times he wasn't able to attend, so Shanann would just go there with other friends from Thrive. Shanann hit a big goal in her sales. So she won a car bonus, which was actually a lease agreement. And in order to come up with the down payment on the car, Chris had to sell his beloved Mustang that he worked on for years and made payments. But, he did it willingly for his wife and her business. She chose a 2016 Lexus for her car bonus, but she had to meet a monthly quota each month for the MLN to make each lease payment. Otherwise, she had to make the payments herself. I may have mentioned it before, it was $800 a month. I would have just paid the $800 a month. But your upline really wants it to look like you're doing great. So the poor thing would end up buying enough products and putting them in her basement to look like she sold them. Or she'd sell them to her downline, which is Chris and Bella. Later on, she got a few other downlines. I think N.A., Nicole Atkinson was one of them, but I can't be 100% sure. What happened was, when she made those goals, it wasn't just her. It's her and everybody below her. So it's not like you're walking away with an $80,000 salary for that year. It doesn't work that way. You will get an earnings check, I guess, about once a month. And it might look like a really big amount, but you have to take out the expenses. Buying the products, the cost of all your trips, because they pay for very few trips, and even then they only pay for maybe only the room, maybe only the cost of the flight or whatever. Okay, they're not all inclusive trips. Okay, the earnings minus the expenses will equal the net salary. In August of 2017, Shanann had a disc fusion type of surgery on her neck. Her close friend, Christina Meacham, who she had known ever since high school, I guess, flew in from Hawaii to stay for a while to help around the house while Shanann recovered. Now, that's what I call a devoted friend. Her little girl accompanied her and played with the Watts girls. And I believe that once Shanann was starting to feel a little better, she and Christina took a little trip in the car, just a short one. Meanwhile, once the summer came along, their mortgage was 3 months late. The credit cards were almost maxed out. Shanann and Chris took a short weekend Thrive trip to San Diego. Then she went to North Carolina with her girls for 6 weeks, and Chris was not able to join them until the 6th week. So she was without him for 5 weeks, and he lived the bachelor life for those 5 weeks. Then when she got back, they were having a little trouble, and you'll hear about it in the next few frames. And the trouble's starting to get very obvious. When they got home from the trip to North Carolina, she took a short weekend trip to Arizona for Thrive, and that's where it got really bad. Now we're going to backtrack slightly from when Shanann and Chris went to San Diego. His childhood friend who was stationed there met him, and they went and talked for a while. He confided in him about his marriage and his attraction to Nicole Kessinger, which he says was like nothing big was happening yet, but there was a big attraction. They were just friends at the time, is what he said. But during that trip there, you will also see pictures of Chris and Shanann hugging each other and being very affectionate, which tells me that maybe he was not yet physical with NK. When Chris and NK just started talking, casually, he said to her that he was going through a separation when she saw his phone with a picture of Shanann and the girls. However, he did not say he was going through an actual divorce. So she should have known, and he's still living at the house, so she should have known that they were kind of still together. She also knew at this point that Shanann and the girls were taking 5 weeks in North Carolina before he met them for the final week. And no sooner did that plane leave the ground and they took off for North Carolina that Chris got together with NK. And they talked a lot and started getting kind of romantic. They also did not waste any time doing it. Before Shanann and the girls left for North Carolina, she did discuss, trying to keep their spending down and downsizing to a different, a smaller house. She did mention a few neighborhoods in Colorado, but she also planned to look at some houses in North Carolina with her friend from high school, Chris Miller, and his mom, who also did real estate. Meanwhile, Chris slept at NK's house on the night of July 3rd. July 4th, he had a day off, of course, it's a holiday, and he's 2 hours behind the East Coast. So Nicole went to go take a shower, and he kept getting messages. I miss you. Why aren't you answering me? What's wrong? What's going on? Chris went back outside to answer the call and, the texts. And NK had gotten a little bit upset about it, like saying, do you have to go run to her every time, or something to that effect. She had an attitude. NK also said something like, are we going to see each other later? And I believe Chris said, no, I don't think so, and left. Well, it was 4th of July, and after leaving Nicole's house, NK's house, Chris was just doing some cleaning up around his own house when NK decided to come over and help him with his macros. In other words, his MyFitnessPal app. You have to have like certain amounts of protein and whatnot. So she went over it with him. They hung out for a while, and what happened was she went upstairs to use the restroom, and she got very upset when she saw a picture of a sonogram for a baby and found out that Shanann was pregnant. Between you and me, I think she always knew that she was pregnant, because later on I'll discuss that she did look on Facebook a lot. And if it's a public profile on Facebook, which Shanann was, you didn't have to belong to Facebook, because she says, oh no, I don't do social media anymore, yada, yada, yada. Well, she was looking at her, so it could not have been a surprise to her. But maybe it was her chance to, yell at Chris or something for lying, whatever. So she goes upstairs and sees a picture and finds out that Shanann is pregnant. And she's talking to him. NK is talking to CW, very, very upset. I don't want to be second fiddle. I want to be first, and I want to have your first son. They got into a little bit of a lot of a disagreement. And Chris explains later, talking to the cops, that he had to talk NK off the ledge. When she went out to her car, pissed off, she went out to her truck and started texting him from the truck. That's like a 12-year-old trick, but yeah, whatever. So after all that was settled and they had the talk and everything, she had plans that night to go out with her friends. So Chris just went to see the fireworks with some of his friends and neighbors. Now here is the Nutgate incident. Shanann was planning to spend weekends with Chris's mom and during the week with her own parents. What happened was Jamie leaves her children with Cindy, Mrs. Watts, when she goes to work. So Bella and Cece got to play with them, which was great. But what happened was, even though Mrs. Watts took Shanann to the supermarket to buy things that are safe, that do not have any tree nuts that would hurt Cece, that day was a disaster. What happened was one of the cousins, the older cousins, got herself a dish of vanilla, a little serving size cup of vanilla ice cream. Okay, Cece being only almost 3 years old, but still little, she saw it and wanted some. Now, Cindy was right there. By the way, before we get any further, she did not have razor blades around the house. She had one on the back of the stove to clean the glass stovetop. None of the children could reach it. She also, when she saw that there were nuts out, pistachios, when the girls were there, she immediately put them on top of the refrigerator. So please don't be throwing some story around that her and her daughter Jamie were purposely trying to give nuts to the children. Jamie was at work, first of all. Second of all, some people might not believe this, but Chris's parents loved those granddaughters. That's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, I don't want to have a bigger conflict than it already is. Some of the ice cream that you buy in stores, even if it is a plain flavor, will have a little warning. This product was made in a factory that also processes tree nuts. You will also have the same sign at fast food restaurants and on breakfast cereal that the girls ate regularly. Okay, Shanann took them for allergy tests a couple years back, and it turned out they were both allergic, but Cece was really allergic. So Cindy would never do anything to purposely hurt her granddaughters. But what happened was Shanann got really upset, and she thought, what's going on here? Cindy said, she can't have everything she wants. And all of a sudden, Shanann said that, I'm going home or whatever, or I'm going back to my parents' house. She thought that Cindy was trying to give nuts to the children, which is not true. Okay, by the way, the children ate breakfast cereal regularly with that same warning on it. Okay, and also they ate at fast food places that have the same warning in the window, in the drive-through, and probably throughout the restaurant. Okay, I'm not trying to start anything here. I'm just telling you that is what happened, because she spent like $300 or $500. Okay, now the Watts family were of more modest means, kind of like myself, She didn't have a ton of money to spend, but she threw out the food that was not safe for Cece and bought a whole bunch of food, hundreds of dollars worth, so that the girls could have things that they could eat. And they ended up having a fight, and she said, then, go back to your parents' house. And Shanann immediately called her parents and asked them to come pick her and the girls up. She later got on the phone with Chris and said, those kids are never going to see your parents again. She told the whole story. Now, at first, Chris was sticking up for her, saying, that's terrible. How could she do that? And he called up his parents and gave them a piece of his mind. Shortly after, there was going to be a birthday party for Cece. Now, both of Chris's parents, of course, wanted to go, but Shanann was putting things all over Facebook. My mother-in-law tried to, hurt my kids with nuts, tree nuts and stuff. I mean, Mr. and Mrs. Watts did not want to show their face at a party afterwards and have people gossiping, looking at her. However, in her book that she wrote, or she started writing, she did say that she regretted not going. And she regretted not going to the wedding either. But when you're in her spot, what would you do? Okay, please, I want people to stop demonizing either of the families, okay? They both lost loved ones. Okay, I realize that Mr. and Mrs. Rusick lost their own child, but those grandchildren were just as much grandchildren of the Watts family than they were of the Rusicks. Okay, so let's get that straight. Shanann told Chris, "You're not allowed to see your parents anymore either." And when she saw how cold, once he got to North Carolina, and she saw he was still being cold to her, she started, relaxing her stance on that a little bit. Well, the girls can't see him. Then she said, well, they'll have to apologize first. You don't get to treat my kids badly and then expect them to, you know, can't expect to get rewarded for it, is what she said. All this was put on Facebook, by the way. So Mr. Watts Sr., Ronnie Watts, unfriended all of them. A lot of weird things were happening. There was a lot of unpleasantness once Chris got there. He was still being cold to Shanann, and meanwhile she's texting all her friends back in Colorado, and actually they lived all over the country. She texts one person, he's being really cold to me, what should I do? She was really upset. Now she's let me see, she was 15 weeks into her pregnancy, and she was starting to feel really sick. She was up all night with morning sickness, and her brother Frankie was kind of helping her out, and Chris just went in the bedroom with the girls and went to sleep. She was out on the couch with her brother. And it was just a terrible scene. He didn't want to go near her. He was being lukewarm to her, like I said. She said, you haven't touched me in weeks. What is going on here? This is a marriage falling apart, unfortunately, but I am blaming a certain empanada for making it worse. If she hadn't stepped into this picture, maybe they could have worked it out. But one thing I'll tell you, in Chris's fault, he needed to grow a set, if you know what I'm saying. Now, I kind of understand how he is. He doesn't want conflict. I'll tell you, I was the same way. As I get older, I get more cranky, I guess you can say. But I was afraid of everybody and everything, and I'm still very uncomfortable with confrontation. I mean, Shanann admitted that she felt bad that Chris said he couldn't even hang a picture in their house without getting her permission. So she was starting to see the light. She was starting to see that she was pushy. Okay, so it was really messed up. Then Chris made a couple of confessions that I'm not sure if they're all true. But one thing he did confess was that he snuck some Vicodin type of pill in Shanann's drink or something, or he slipped it to her somehow, and she got even more sick. Some of them were saying, go to the hospital, please. And she said no, because it's out of network. I'm sorry, but if you're that sick and you have a baby whose life depends on it, it doesn't matter. Go to any hospital. But she did not, unfortunately. When CW and NK were not together, they would text each other little lovey messages and some racy pictures that he took of her that she sent him. Hers would say, I love you. You're not the only one obsessed. I don't want to be second in your life. I want to give you your first son. Likewise, CW sent texts to NK. I love you, my sexy empanada. Your green eyes mesmerize me. I'm obsessed. Before leaving for his trip to join his family in North Carolina, he took a little trip to the Sand Dunes National Park with his sexy empanada. By the way, the girl here, I know she's much, much too pretty and too tan. Anyway, I couldn't find a better picture. Here's a picture of the two lovebirds kissing. second one is Miss NK saying, Christopher, I'm having a wonderful time. Thank you so much for coming. Oh, I'm out of breath. If Chris never met Jim, in other words, leave Jim alone, if Chris never met him, who took the picture of the two of them smooching? I don't think Chris's arm would reach out far enough to take a selfie with them. I don't know. Somebody else could have taken the picture, but whatever. While bidding each other goodbye as Chris leaves for North Carolina, Nikki NK says, try to work things out with your wife. Try to make it work. She's so beautiful, and you two look like you have a beautiful life. Isn't she noble? Right before leaving for North Carolina, Shanann asked Chris if he took a Uber or a taxi or anything. And he said, no, I parked at the long-term parking lot. And she said, well, that's money we could have used for the beach. Once Chris got off the plane in North Carolina, Shanann wanted to get the picture of them seeing each other and running and greeting each other. So she filmed the whole thing. He hugged and kissed both girls, and he gave Shanann a lukewarm kiss. Now, I realize I jumped ahead from the Nutcake story, which was before Chris arrived in North Carolina, to after the story, because it's kind of all connected in a way. Okay, so now Chris just gets to North Carolina. I already told the first night he was there, he was very cold to Shanann, and she had gotten sick and got even sicker from a pill he gave her because, believe it or not, he was trying to make her lose the baby, which is horrible. At least that's what he confessed, okay? Meanwhile, Miss Hot Pants, the empanada, after telling him to try to work things out with your wife, what does she do? She sends texts with her in the racy bathing suit or whatever, maybe even showing more than that. Not only that, but she calls him and says, "What are you doing with her? You're with her." She sounded like really jealous. I mean, I think she spoke with forked tongue. You know what I'm saying? Um, she had a lot of nerve, and that really peed me off. It really did, and I'm sure everyone else too. He was always keeping the phone hidden, sneak out front to talk on the phone. A couple of times, Shanann even was texting her on the phone with one of her Thrive friends, saying, I wonder if he's seeing somebody. Now, some people say after the fact that she knew because she was able to look up his phone calls on the computer because they had kind of a linked account with their phones. I don't know the truth, but one of her friends said maybe he is having an affair, and her answer was, no, he's got no game. I think he got some more game when he got his muscles and got thin and confident, in fact, to a point where he's maybe overconfident. I don't know. I mean, it was just a sad story all around. Those first 5 weeks in North Carolina, Shanann was able to take a couple of Thrive side trips, say parts of Florida, maybe North Florida, um, maybe South Carolina, a couple of surrounding states, and some even in the state. And she also got to see her old high school friends. And she also saw the ladies that worked with her mom at the salon. Chris, Shanann, and the girls took a little trip to the beach for a couple days. And the grandparents on her side, which is Sandy and Frank Sr., went along with them. Now, before she said that, the Watts grandparents were not allowed to see the girls anymore, they had rented a house too, but it was way down the beach. And the sad part is that Mr. Watts Sr. had already taken time off work and everything. So, I guess they went, but they never got to see the girls again. Meanwhile, the girls had fun running in and out of the waves with Daddy, and Shanann just took pictures and videos. Before heading back to Colorado, Chris took one last little visit to go see his parents and sister, and he confided in his dad a lot about the affair, the marriage problems, etc. So they did have a talk. He had spoken with his mom briefly, and he confided in his sister as well. Well, the family left North Carolina at the end of their vacation and flew back home to Colorado. Shanann was determined to do what she could to make the marriage work again. And if a certain person hadn't gotten in the way, maybe it would have. But unfortunately, it came to a different end. And that's a whole section of this video that will be part 3. Thank you.